Friends, hello. This is Carter. Welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the podcast where I just sit down and talk with other writers. I've gotten some decent feedback from all of you all, and it sounds like you're loving hearing from writers and their journey and tips and advice along the way. And just a teaser, today's guest hasn't been published yet, but has written 9 novels. So there's a certain amount of extra special insight from somebody who hasn't yet been published, who certainly will be published probably very soon, is my guess. But I think it's good to hear from all different types of voices in different stages of their career. And sometimes hearing from people who are still in the early stages of their publication career, I think is especially helpful. And if you're watching this on video, you can see my awesome new Blondie t-shirt. I'm very excited. I'm a t-shirt guy. Every day is a t-shirt. Almost every day is a t-shirt. Many days are music t-shirts. I grew up as a teenager in the 80s in Southern California, and K-Rock was my station, and that was all alternative indie 80s music. So I'm Blondie, The Cure, Stone Roses, Depeche Mode, The Smiths, obviously James. That's my jam. So I have almost an endless supply of band t-shirts. So if you see me out in public, that's probably what I am going to be wearing. I am going to give a quick plug for my book, Tell Me What You Did. I had a conversation earlier today, actually, with my publisher. And so my book came out in January of this year, so January 2025. It is now mid-August as I'm recording this. So it's been about 7 months since it's been out, about 6.5 months. And we were looking at some numbers and they're pretty good. I think I can officially call this a breakout book. And I will tell you how, I'll give you some context for that. We looked up on BookScan all the thrillers that have been published since the beginning of 2024, so a year and a half ago. And there's nearly 7,900 titles. And in terms of sales of physical copies, I am in the top 25 of that list. Not the top 25%, the top 25, which is unbelievable to me, because no other book of mine has done that well. So I think this is a breakout novel officially, which is so exciting. It took 20 years for it to happen. So if you're an aspiring writer, it can and may happen. It just might take a little bit of time. So make sure you are listening to advice. You're striving to get better. You are continuing to have a massive passion for storytelling, because that's what it takes. Because I went through a lot of rejection along the way. And if you can frame that rejection as learning, if you can frame your unpublished novels as necessary experiences to get to the next level, do that, because that is the absolute truth. And we talked about that a little bit in our conversation today. So the guest on my show today is my buddy, Dwayne Goetzel. So Dwayne is somebody I met through attending Thriller Fest over the years. That is the International Thriller Writers Conference. They have their annual conference in New York City every June-ish. And he's one of these guys you start to see his face after a while, and he volunteers. He's actually the head of security for Thriller Fest, but all the volunteers for Thriller Fest are writers. And he has written 9 novels, but he has not yet been published. He's gone through experiences with 3 different agents. So it's been quite a journey, and he's also a trademark and IP attorney. So we talked quite a bit, not only about his journey and kind of his advice from his perspective of, the road that he's been on, and particularly as it pertains to the absolute necessity of networking in the writing community, just like you would in any other business. But we also talked about the importance and his take on IP rights for books. Should you copyright your book? That hasn't been sold yet. So he had a really good perspective on that. This is the world he lives in, so he is obviously a subject matter expert there. But it was just great to connect with him on a level of learning kind of what the market is like out there right now. Hearing back from publishers or not hearing back from publishers, the difficulty of even getting agents to look at your stuff right now, and maybe some advice on best practices on how to go about doing that. So it's an episode that probably even runs a little bit long, but it was full of great information. So this is an engaging and highly useful episode of Making It Up, and I think you're going to like it. This is my conversation with Dwayne Goetzel. But yeah, so when did we first meet? Probably at a Thriller Fest several years ago, I'm guessing, right?
It was. I suspect it had to have been pre-COVID Thriller Fest, I think, but
Yeah,
honestly, I lose track of the time and I don't remember. I've been going to Thriller Fest for 10 years roughly.
that's great.
So
Yeah. I mean, I started going to Thriller Fest certainly before I was published. And I remember, and we I used to be in the corporate world, so you're going to conferences all the time for whatever your industry is, and it was so weird to me to go to a conference that structurally was similar, panels and whatnot, and but stuff that was interesting. Stuff
right.
that was like, oh my God, there's a panel on poison.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I remember going to Craft Fest and just feeling like it's kind of overwhelming because there's so much advice and so many people who even saying conflicting things because everyone does everything differently. And it's inspiring and it's also overwhelming because you get back and you're like, I don't know where to start.
That's that's exactly what it was for me. I think the first time I went, I did Craft Fest, and it's the all day long thing with whatever 8 or 10 people. And yeah, I felt like when I came back, oh, I have no clue what I'm doing. This is bad. This is really, really bad.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? It puts you in your place, and that never goes away. By the way, that's
Yeah. Oh, good.
that's the nature of being a writer is that the imposter syndrome is pervasive and permanent,
Yeah.
and all you can do is manage it like an illness. Um, but let's back up a little bit just
Yeah.
to understand kind of how you started writing. Was that, you're an attorney now, but most people who we know who are writers have that full-time job, because that's the essential component of life is because writing doesn't pay. But as a kid, was this something that was interesting to you, or you started coming out of nowhere
Yeah.
from it?
Yeah. No, I've always written. And it was primarily just for myself. I would write stories, short stories, whatever, read them over, shove them in my desk, and never to be seen again.
Like what
Uh,
age are we talking about?
Probably by first, second, third grade,
Oh
certainly.
wow. Yeah, so you
Um,
you were a dreamer early on.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
no doubt.
that's so interesting. But then you didn't have the desire to like even show your parents or anything like that, or
I mean, occasionally I would, but not really. My mom has always kind of been my biggest fan, but your mother is expected to say, "Oh, darling, everything you do is so wonderful and so great," and
not
all of
everyone's mother.
that stuff.
But yes, I think generally that's the consensus.
Yeah. So, it wasn't anything that I wanted to rely on too heavily. But yeah, my mom, she always kind of encouraged that. And I come from educational background. My dad was a teacher. My mom was a secretary in the public schools.
Okay.
I was very fortunate to have good teachers all the way through, and they always encouraged that. One of the things that I need to post, for example, I have this one story that I wrote. I think it was first or second grade. It just totally original thing. We had to make up some story, and I not only wrote it, but I also illustrated the cover for it. And the teacher, her comment at the top was, "This is very original. Good job." And of course, my mom saved it. So that's the
Right,
only reason that I know
right,
or remember it.
right. Your first work.
Exactly, exactly, which has not led to fame or riches yet.
And but it's, I've talked to a lot of writers, obviously, and most have the commonality of being some kind of storyteller from a young age. And then, as a teenager, any kind of self-awareness about what we want to do, or what even we want to study if we choose to go to college, is a very, how would a 16-year-old know, like that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. But some people do. Some people are like, I love to write stories as a kid, and I absolutely want to be an English major or get my MFA or whatever it is. I certainly wasn't like that. I didn't have any aspirations to write until it started. But with you, it sounds like that wasn't kind of a driving force informing what you wanted to study post high school.
No, it really wasn't. I'd always wanted to write, but it was always something that I thought, well, okay, I'll do it later. I mean, I can't tell you how many incomplete novels I have that I started at various points along the way. I have one, it was a legal thing that I started working on right after I became a practicing lawyer. So I was 27, 28 at the time,
Hmm.
and started on this novel and got 50, 60 pages in, and life interferes and you put it aside and all of that. So I think the desire was always there, but the drive wasn't. And I allowed other things to interfere versus cordoning off time and saying,
Yeah,
okay, if this is something you really want to do, you got to find the time for it.
yeah.
Uh,
That's a very self-aware comment, by the way, because what you said was the drive wasn't there, so I allowed other things to get in the way. Most people say other things got in the way, and I find that really interesting working with writers, with aspiring writers. And we always talk about, why are you doing this? Why are you writing? What is the passion behind it? Is there a passion behind it? What is your goal? And a lot of people, I think, not maybe not a lot, there are people who I think enjoy the idea of being a writer more than they enjoy the actual practice of being a writer. And when that happens, life does get in the way very easily, right? Because you're not prioritizing because you don't love it deep down. And that love, I think that love develops over time, you know? So you being self-aware enough to say, this wasn't yet quite at that point in my life, it was interesting, but it wasn't the passion that maybe it has now become. Um, that's why you didn't finish the book, was what it sounds like.
well, there's probably other reasons, lack of talent and various other things, I suppose. But
Oh,
uh,
I lack of talent has never stopped me. I've written plenty of shitty books that never sold, and that's how you get talented, by writing those shitty books. I think
yeah,
talent is actually a pretty relatively small piece of the equation. I think tenacity,
yeah,
consistency, creating those grooves in your brain, and the vulnerability and the humility to learn and to take rejection and to really focus and study other people's writings and other people's wisdom. That's probably 80% of it combined, is my guess.
yeah. I mean, I hope that's true because that's certainly been my journey of, okay, you write a book, great. You think it's wonderful. You get slapped down multiple times and you realize it's not great because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah,
So I need to actually pay attention more to what others are doing and how something is structured. And oh, these are kind of the things. If you're going to do the three act structure, this is what you have to do. There has to be a beginning, middle, and end, and not
right.
just, oh, I'm going to reinvent and wander everywhere. So
Yeah, and it's a balance, right? Because there's the lessons, which, as we said earlier, can be conflicting advice. But then there's the traditional lessons, like the hero's journey, like the three act structure. But then there's also your your nature as a human and as a writer. And if those things are in conflict with one another and you're trying to force a three act structure where your brain and your style doesn't really adhere to that traditionally, it's going to be a mess, I think, because if I start thinking about the quote unquote rules as I'm writing, I freeze up, so I just let it come and know like this is going to be a shitty first draft, but the bits in there that are going to stay are going to be so organic and good because they came from just my subconscious and not from what people have told me to do.
Right.
Then you can build around that a little bit. And that, for me, that just took years and years and years to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. It definitely is a process. And, as much as I would have loved to have taken writing more seriously when I was younger, I don't think I was equipped to do it. I don't
Right.
think I had the knowledge and experience, and I don't want to say wisdom, but the things that I would have written about in my late 20s or what would have been, important to me at that time, completely different from
Of
what they
course,
are
of
now.
course. But that's true for everybody, right? Like
Yeah,
I look
I
back
hope.
on, my first stuff, I was in my early 30s when I started writing, and, you just had kids. So of course, like that's kind of a factor in the book, and but it's also kind of interesting because it's just a timestamp of your life. Not
Yeah.
that I ever go back and read any of my old stuff, but I know that that stuff is in there. But I don't want to brush over the fact, which is so funny, and you kind of just did it, and most people I talk to do it. They have these throwaway comments about how they wrote a book or wrote a partial book and it wasn't any good, and writing a partial book is still more than almost what anyone in the world does. And no one is so funny how authors don't look back and appreciate like, wow, this I wrote a lot. This is substantial. And almost nobody does that.
Mhm.
And people dismiss often like, well, I wrote something, but it didn't sell, so I suck and whatever. I'm like, you wrote
Yeah.
a fucking book, man. That's a it takes a certain personality type to, because how many people have we met at Thriller Fest who want to write a book? And they've always
Yeah.
wanted to write a book. And there's something about the personality type that says, well, let me sit down and do it. And I think tenacity is a big part of it. Stubbornness, goal driven people, just to
Yeah.
see, can I do this? Do you kind of throw yourself in that category?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't hurt to have a bit of OCD and then have someone tell you you can't do it.
Yeah, right, right, right. That's the match to the kindling.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm very good at if if I decide that I'm going to do something or I determine that I need to do something, um, that I generally will follow through, and it's a really good trait to have as a lawyer. Uh, Less good of a trait to have with your wife, for example. Uh,
But who was like, just out of curiosity, and maybe you were being flippant about it, but were people actually telling you you can't do it?
it wasn't that you can't do it. It was more, I think so much criticism tends to be people thinking that they're being kind to you. You know, they're not necessarily trying to be negative in
They're
the
saying
sense
good luck
of,
with that.
yeah, it could be family members going, "Oh, well, are you going to have time to do that? What about your 4-year-old?
Oh,
Or,
or-
should you be doing that? Shouldn't you be
right.
concentrating on your work
Or it's
more?"
great for everyone to have a hobby.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh, that's so sweet.
Which is
What
funny
time are the
because
bears
when
up?
I started writing, I didn't tell anybody, including my wife at the time, because not because I was afraid they would tell me I couldn't do it, but because I was afraid I
Yeah.
wasn't going to finish it. And I don't want to go tell everyone I'm going to be a novelist. And I'm like, yeah, I wrote 20 pages. And then, and then a lot of it's the imposter syndrome too. It's just
Yeah.
like you're almost embarrassed that you're writing. It's almost like this weird, shameful thing, which takes years to go away. For me, at least,
Uh-huh.
it's weird.
Yeah, I didn't have the shame of it, but I did the exact same thing. I didn't tell a single person.
Hmm.
My wife knew that I was, you know, occupying the couch with the computer
It's
for hours
exactly
on
the same.
end.
Like you're really putting in the extra hours.
Yeah, yeah. But friends, no, I didn't. I didn't tell friends. I didn't tell family. I didn't tell anyone. until yeah, I'm sure yeah, I'm sure a couple of people knew, but I think it was probably just my wife and my mom after book one or two. And I had no intention of telling anybody until I got an agent and it looked like, okay, things were progressing and then maybe there was some interest from publishers and so forth. And
Right.
if it wasn't for my agent wanting me to build up social media, I probably sitting here today still wouldn't have told any of my friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also kind of weird having a full-time job and wondering like, well, what are they going to think? And are they going to think like I'm not spending as much time on my work because no one who isn't a writer has any idea what it actually takes. And what I learned is I could do it by writing 1 hour a day. So it wasn't taking away from anything, but
Mm.
people don't know that. They don't know if like,
Yeah.
is he writing when he's at work and is he,
Right, right, right.
so it's a weird thing, but I think a lot of it is that imposter syndrome too, because I remember you get that thing and you're probably in this right now. You're at a cocktail party and somebody says, what do you do? I guarantee you the first thing you say is that you're a lawyer.
Yeah,
You don't say you're a writer,
yeah,
which is fucking ridiculous because you're a writer. But you feel like and I wasn't telling people I was a writer until after my third book had hit the bestsellers list. I wasn't, even then, it wasn't necessarily the first thing I said,
yeah,
because I'm like, I'm not paying my mortgage with this, so how dare I call myself this? Which is
yeah.
a little bit poisonous. It's a balance because I don't know. I could go on and on about it, but I do think we have to own who we are deep down and kind of declare it. And it can feel fraudulent, but I think it's also important because I do think it kind of manifests itself eventually. Um,
It's an interesting point because I have never said that that's what I am or that's what I do.
mhm,
And my dividing line has always been once I get a book published, then I can say that.
right.
But up until then, it's me playing around, with the computer and writing stories and so forth. But that doesn't make me a quote writer until someone else validates it in a way.
Right. And those goalposts keep moving. I will tell you that because so for example, by that argument, you could self-publish and say you're a writer, but I can guarantee you, knowing a little bit about you, you would not either self-publish or you wouldn't call yourself a writer having done that. Um,
Absolutely not.
if you get the agent and you get the traditional deal, you'll be and the money's whatever the money is. It's traditionally writing doesn't pay very much. I remember, my first book deal with my fourth book because my first three didn't sell was $2,000 was the advance, and they only ended up paying half that because they went out of business. Um, and so then all of a sudden you're like, am I a writer? And so you're like, okay, so the goalpost eventually becomes once I'm supporting myself full time doing this, then I'm a writer. And of course, that's like 0.00 whatever percent of
Yeah.
writers who could do that. So it's totally, so it's really poisonous.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. I'd never really thought about it in those terms. For me, it's just the black and white. Once you're published, okay, then you're officially a writer. And until you are, you're kind of
Yeah.
just playing around.
I mean, I think it is for me, it was very much about goal setting. Like I wrote a manuscript. I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about the publishing industry. I didn't know how books worked. I just happened to have written a book. And so I started researching it. And then I'm like, all right, my goal is to just get an agent. That's why I never self-publish because it's like, that's not important to me, having my book out there. What's important to me is I think exactly what you said, that validation from an industry professional. In the case of an agent, somebody who's willing to take a risk on you because they don't make a dime until something sells. And then once I got the agent, I'm like, I just want to have one book published. I want to be able to show my kids in a bookstore, that's my book. And then you hopefully hit that goal and then you set other goals, whatever they are. But you don't ever write a paragraph and think I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. Um,
Right.
that those distances are way too far apart, at least mentally for me.
Right. No, I agree. And I think it's I think what you're saying is true, that it tends to be, I think, just human nature that you reach a goal and then what's the next one? And you
Yeah.
hit that one and then what's the next one? And I think we are just compelled to always want more, to always push for more. And so you're never really satisfied. And, you've been successful with your books and so forth, but I would be willing to bet you would not go, cool, got those books on the bookshelf. I can show my kids I'm done.
Right.
Right?
But I think that therein lies the underlying why of your writing and how you have to investigate that. Because I remember that why has to be present during the hard times because that's when it gets tested. And I remember when my books weren't selling and I was writing more furiously because I was afraid my agent was going to drop me. I just realized like I love doing this. Like it's really
Yeah.
fucking hard
Yeah.
and I'm struggling, especially when you're starting out and you don't know how sentences work. And but I'm like, there's something about the puzzle solving of it all that is so compelling. So yeah, I think you do want to keep setting those goals, and I agree that is human nature. But if you wash your hands, it's probably because it wasn't your thing. It was an Everest to climb, and you did it, and you hated it, and you're never doing it again.
Right,
But I
right.
remember early on, when I think about why I write, my answer is I just can't picture myself not doing it. I picture myself, however long I live, typing on the keyboard or whatever it's
Yeah.
going to look like then. So what, in terms of what you have written now, like you have completed novels now, not just partials.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the smartest things I was ever told, and again, this is kind of where the OCD comes in, is just keep writing,
Yeah,
you know? And someone told me, great, you've written a book. Cool. Don't just flog it to death, that one book.
right.
Send it out, query if there's no interest, write something else.
Yeah,
And that's what I've done.
right.
So, and I
That's
also I also have written several different things in different genres because, at least in my mind, I was thinking, well, if something doesn't work out for that particular genre, then I have something else that I can point to.
right.
So, for example, my first agent, who I loved, he unfortunately retired from agenting. Uh, if he hadn't, I'm pretty convinced I would be published by now. Um, he I wrote a international spy thriller involving a German female spy, and he signed me for that and tried to sell it, but the timing was wrong because apparently international thrillers at the time were passe, and this goes back several years. And he suggested, why don't you try domestic suspense? And I said, I don't know anything about domestic suspense. And he said, of course you do. You're a husband, you're a father, you
Right,
know.
right,
I was
right.
like,
You've wanted to kill your wife from
oh,
time to time.
yeah, okay, got it. Yeah, we got lots of stories there. No
Yeah,
problem. So I did that, and that was the one that my second agent signed me for, and she said that she loved it and didn't do anything. She never queried. I spent an entire year, and she never sent out a query, never did a single thing, even though she said, "Oh, I love it. It doesn't need hardly any changes." And then a few months later, she said, "Oh, you need a few changes." And so I made those, and then again, nothing. So yeah,
wow,
I have over that time I have kept on writing. I think I have 9 complete novels that are
wow.
just sitting around waiting for someone
Right,
to say, I love you.
right, right. Well, and that advice that you mentioned is totally true. So when I'm working with students through my coaching, and I'm, say, for example, doing a manuscript review, and maybe it's the first thing that they've written, and I'll be reading it, and you just get the sense of like, okay, A, this person can totally write. B, this book doesn't work. And I can see, and for a number of different reasons, which is what I tell them about, which is why they hire me. But I think about it from my own perspective. I'm like, this is the kind of book that, yeah, you could rewrite this potentially to death, or you could just recognize this as I needed this to write the next thing.
Right.
That movement is really hard for a lot of people to do. You recognize that early on, which is so critical of like, I've got other stories to tell, and now I have learning experiences that all have, become accretive, and now I can use all of that for my next one. And people will say like, "Oh, aren't you frustrated with the three that never sold?" I'm like, I needed those. Like, I'm not. Why don't you go back and try to sell it? I got other shit to write. I'm a different writer than I was back then. So
Yeah.
that's a very mature attitude that most people don't have. So that's great. But now it gets frustrating too because you're like, I got nine fucking books. Somebody buy one of these things.
Yeah, I would love for, one of them. It's the story that you want and that I've heard from a number of others that, okay, you keep writing, you write something, and then you want the publisher to come back and say, so what else do you have?
Yeah,
That's what I'm hoping for, is that eventually someone will say, so what else do you have? Well, as a
yeah,
matter of fact, here, I've got these. Uh,
totally. And it'll probably be. This is just my opinion. The last two or three, the most recent two or three that are going to be the relevant ones because that's how your voice is now.
yeah.
It was eight written books, so my fifth published book that I can go look back on and be like, oh, there's my voice. Like that's where
Mhm.
I realized it came. Like that's the most natural style of writing was that, and that's how I write now. I couldn't write, or I wouldn't want to write like my first couple that were published. I'm just different, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
No, that's 100% accurate. If you look back at your early thing, you often think, was this the same person who wrote this?
right, right. I mean, to me, it was, I mean, just the profound difference between third person past and first person present, which is how I write now. It's such a distinct difference. And the voice just does crazy different things once you make that shift. And it's just more interesting. It's more fun for me, and it's more natural for me to write
Mm.
that way.
Hmm.
So where are you at right now in terms of you have nine books? It sounds like you probably dropped the agent who decided never to go on submission with your book.
Right.
So are you in the agent hunt again? And
I have an agent right now.
okay,
She had I don't know what's going on with her querying because she says that she has sent out queries to a number of publishers, some large, some medium, some small, and has apparently not heard anything in response.
yeah.
No, no, thank you, no send a partial, no send a full, absolute, complete, total silence. So neither of us know what's going on right now, and it's a really weird limbo to be in.
Yeah, and I think that is not uncommon. I recently co-authored a YA thriller with a friend of mine that, my editor doesn't do YA. And so we started querying other houses, and some it's been 7 months we haven't heard anything.
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, this is a relatively established author. You'd think you'd at least hear or know.
Yeah.
I think that's just the industry. I think it's worse now than ever in terms of getting response times. Getting an agent apparently is harder now than it's ever been before, according to my agent at least. So and there's just so much out there, and that's that's not going to go in the other direction anytime soon. Because
Yeah.
people are obviously can generate books much easier now than they used to be able to, and
Hmm.
that's a whole other conversation. But I also want to talk a little bit about you recognized early on you've been at Thriller Fest for 10 years. It's important to be part of the community. Obviously, sure, we're going early on because we want to learn,
Yeah.
but you volunteer your time every year at Thriller Fest. You've obviously, you're a nice person, so that's I'm sure a big part of it. But the idea of getting to know other people and being a part of the community is completely invaluable.
Oh,
I've
100%.
learned that. So what has your experience been like doing all that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. When I first started, it was what can I learn and take that knowledge to make me a better writer. And that was the case for probably the first three or so, I would guess. And eventually I realized, and I'm an idiot sometimes, that in the working world, networking is paramount.
Mhm.
So why would it be any different
It's
in
exactly the
in
same.
publishing, right?
Right. It's exactly the
So
same.
Yeah, so I started volunteering, not just going as a participant, and kind of just got to know people and so forth. And it's funny because I am the head of security for Thriller Fest, even though I have no background in security. And it
Right. You're a
consists,
little menacing looking. I mean,
tall enough, I guess, but
yeah.
mainly it consists of, yes, ma'am, the restroom is right over here.
Right, right, right.
Uh,
Exactly. It's
but
just
it's
they
been,
need a presence. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, it's been great. And there are certain aspects of my personality that it fits really well with security issues. And if there's a problem, I have no fear whatsoever of
Yeah.
talking to people at any level,
Yeah.
high, low, whatever. I just don't have that fear.
Right.
I'm not starstruck, but it's been really, really cool getting to know these people and getting to become friends with people, these well-known established authors that you would just love to have that kind of career, to be able to talk with them and just, you know, have a
Totally.
regular everyday conversation like you would between you and I or anyone else.
Yeah.
That's been incredible. I have
Yeah.
to.
I 100% agree. And I think, the things that maybe have helped us in that respect is that, like you, I don't have that fear. I can walk up to a cocktail table full of people and just be like, "Hey, can I join your conversation?" Um, but I that's probably a little bit of an outlier for an author. How
Yeah.
many author friends do we have who are just introverts, and that's
Oh, yeah.
that's the scariest thing in the world for them.
Yeah.
So I think your analogy to the business world is apt. And if you're a person who, if you go to your conference in your business world and you are social, why wouldn't you be like that? And then how quickly do we realize like some of these huge name authors are just the gentlest, givingest people
Yeah.
especially in the thriller community. And I don't know why that is, but it's suspense and thriller and mystery writers are just lovely, lovely people. I honestly can't think of any who I'm just like, oh, that person's a dick. Like I've just like, and I've known a lot of them. They're just all nice people. And then you're like, hey, can you blurb my book? Can
Hmm.
you help spread the word? Can you, who's your agent and whatever and all it. And that's maybe a cynical look at it, but those things happen organically. They're not like that's not what you're
Right.
plotting to do. You just
Right.
or somebody says, "Oh, your book sounds great. I know somebody who would love to rep something like that,"
Hmm.
and it just makes a huge difference because otherwise you're just sitting at home behind your keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I tell everybody, I said, it's not enough to just write. You really do have to get involved. You have to network because even if you're not doing it for that purpose, you're not going saying, "Oh, Harlan Coben is going to meet me and love me, and you
Right,
know
right.
he's going to endorse me, and now all of a sudden I'm a million plus seller." That's not the purpose of it. It's you get to know all of these people, you become friends, and maybe they need a favor, maybe you need a favor, but it's in the same way that you become friends with anyone.
Right.
Yeah. When someone needs something, they're going to go, "Oh, yeah, my friend Carter, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can go to him for this."
Totally. Or
Sure.
I've made connections where I've reached out to people, best-selling authors, who I'm like, hey, can I just call you and complain about something that's happening in my life that's writing related, just to have a shoulder to cry on? And that has been really helpful for me because it's a very, not only is it confusing industry, it's opaque. And so when you're dealing with an editor or a publisher and you don't have any experience with it and something feels weird, it's just good to find out, oh yeah, that's, editors always say this or whatever.
Right.
That's been really helpful for me over the years as well. Um,
Yeah, no, I agree.
so from the IP perspective, if we want to kind of dig into that a little bit, explain what IP is. I mean, we know it means intellectual property, but I was talking to somebody, I interviewed them yesterday, a Hollywood writer. She's had a couple movies made. She's just publishing her first novel, and she made the comment like she had actually really had a really interesting comment. She's like, I wrote the novel because it's going to have a better chance of getting made into a limited series if it comes from the novel IP rather than me spec writing three episodes based
Yeah.
on her stature. And she's like, IP is really the issue. It become a big deal in the last 10 to 15 years. So you want to just kind of, this is your wheelhouse if you want to kind of
Yeah.
expand on that as it relates to novels, obviously.
Yeah. No, it's most people who don't know anything about intellectual property, they always confuse, for example, what's a copyright, what's a trademark, that kind of thing. And the simplest analogy I can give, think of a book. The title of the book is the trademark. The interior portion, the wording, that's covered by the copyright. The method of manufacturing the book can be a patent. And, the way that you apply the glitter on the edges of the paper, if that's a secret that you don't tell anyone, that can be a trade secret.
Hmm.
All of these things can work together. You have these bucket of rights. And for a writer, the most important thing really is the copyright, because a copyright allows the writer to do certain exclusive things, to publicly perform it, to publicly display it, to reproduce it, to prepare derivative works from it. So, with the example of the writer you were talking to yesterday, if someone writes a spec script, for example, then you're kind of just it's not that you don't own the copyright in it, but that you're creating something according to someone else's wishes or goals or guidelines or whatever. So the idea is probably coming from someone else, and there may be even more than the idea. Whereas if you create a novel, you're coming up with the character, the voice, what happens, the specific wording on the page. You, as the author, own all of the copyrights in that unless you assign it to someone else. So having that bucket of rights, all of the exclusive rights in something that you create is very, very powerful, that someone is going to have to pay you for or license it or whatever. Otherwise, they can't take what's printed and use it for their own purpose without infringing your rights.
Right. And that's why when you publish a book with a publisher, the copyright is Carter Wilson. The copyright isn't source books. And then, of course, you do assign rights with your contract in terms of subsidiary rights like film and TV rights, audio rights, all that kind of stuff. That all has to be worked out separately. But yeah,
Yeah.
so you have that power in there for sure. And it's funny. I think every time I think of IP, I think of like the Marvel universe, because I feel like that's like always kind of touted as like when you hear about IP is like, these Marvel characters are part of this intellectual property that, a certain studio has rights to, so they can kind of just create derivative stories in perpetuity
Yeah.
from that because it's all contained in that same bundle of rights.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And all of those rights operate in tandem with something like Marvel, because the superhero character names, for example, Spider-Man, what have you, those are all trademarks.
Yeah.
And then the features of the characters, um, you're not going to, if you're at DC, you're not going to have a comic book character or movie character, whatever, that can shoot webs from his wrists and climb up a
Right.
wall and that kind of
Right.
thing
Right.
without getting into Marvel's playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. So what would you, because I remember when I started out writing, one piece of advice that I maybe had read somewhere was like, don't bother, trademarking your novel or copywriting your novel or putting the little copyright logo on the novel. Like you're covered because you have it, and then if it sells, that will be covered as well. But what are your thoughts on all that stuff?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, theoretically, yes, you own the copyright interest in a work once it is completed. However, you can't do anything with it according to the law until you seek registration for it. So the theory is one side and the practice is the other side. If someone infringes your work, takes it, copies it, throws it up on their website, whatever, and you do not have a registration for it, you have to first seek registration for it. But in that situation where the infringement starts before you get the registration, you cannot get statutory damages or attorney's fees. You can only get actual damages. And that's kind of a hard hurdle to prove, to clear. I would have sold X number of these books if you hadn't infringed.
Right,
When
right.
what we're dealing
How
with
do you
is a
do that?
subject.
Prove that,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a subjective thing, right? So my general feeling is you are better off spending I think the filing fee is like $50 or something. Once your work is complete to get it registered, just in case someone infringes, then you have a timely registration. Then you can get statutory damages and attorney's fees because we're expensive. You want that ability to recover attorney's fees.
Right. And right, because and depends on how much you're exposing the book. So if you're querying the books, if you're querying the book for an agent, you're not most of the
Yeah,
time sending out the book,
yeah,
unless they specifically ask it. And that's probably not a place where you're going to have any fear of it being
yeah,
taken.
exactly.
But
It's
if you're, you know, if you're giving it to friends, if you're throwing parts of it up on a website, that may be a little bit scarier.
Yeah, and there are these websites I'm sure you've seen also. I've heard about them. I've never actually spent any time on them, where you can post your entire work, and the idea is you're putting it up there, hoping to attract attention, hoping to attract an agent, that kind of thing. Well, if you're doing that and you're unprotected, and someone takes that, copies it, puts it up, tries to sell it as their own, again, without that timely registration, you've lost a lot of the leverage and the ability to recover.
Right.
So,
Right. Or more insidiously, somebody takes the whole thing and asks AI to make a facsimile of it where it's not verbatim, but it's,
yeah.
close enough.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that happened to a friend of mine. Her
oh,
novel,
really?
yeah, it was thrown into an AI engine and it spit out a version that
A
was
better
kind of in
version?
her voice. Not a better version, but it was a different version that kind of maintained her voice, and it's horrifying to creatives. It should be anyway.
Did that get published?
Yeah, it was in some other country. I don't remember which one.
Oh,
Um, but yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's a topic for another day, but
yeah,
I was, yeah, I was having a conversation with another author at the Columbus Book Festival, and he just kind of said he's old school guy. He's like, I would hate to be an aspiring author right now because you have to prove it's you
yeah,
in a way. And, it's funny, right before this call, I was talking to my PR person over at Source Books about something else. And I kind of made the comment that like, I think now more than ever, it's important for authors to be generating like video content for Instagram, doing like I do a lot of in conversation events because I love it and I think I'm good at it, but I'm like I want to be out there. I want people to see my personality because that's what's going to be left. Hopefully they love my writing, but if they can connect it to a personality, I think that's going to be more important than being the hidden writer who's just generating books because I think books are going to be, content is going to be flooding things right now. And
yeah, yeah.
we want to have more of a connection to the person moving forward. And that's going to be our currency, I think.
No,
Um,
I think that's exactly accurate. I mean, you look at all of the large companies that are just devouring these books, feeding it into the AI engine as training. What are they training it for if
all
it's
right.
not to generate content that sounds like people so that they can cut, the authors and the creatives out of the process? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's going to be a continuing battle, and you have to kind of stand behind you and your name and your personality and everything else. Otherwise, yeah, all of that can just be ginned up with the push of a button.
Yeah. And you have to have the courage to be uncomfortable and do things that maybe you're not used to doing. One of the things I do is I teach public speaking. And just the idea of taking that vulnerable step to put yourself out there and get in front of people. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, obviously, like anything else. But that's what you have. Your authentic
Yeah.
presence. That's
Right.
something that can't be taken away from you. That's one of the reasons these are on video as well. Like, let's see Dwayne. Let's see what he looks like. Let's see what he sounds like. I think that's important. And I think people are going to have this desire for that ability to kind of see the real person behind the words. going
Yeah.
forward. It's and so you as an author have to be able to capitalize on that. And I think a lot of people don't like that, or they look at social media as like, oh, it's this necessary evil. I'm like, well, how, I look at it as it's an opportunity to show people who you are if you're comfortable doing that. I just think it's going to be more and more important going forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I kind of see both sides of that coin. I do see it as a necessary evil, but it also is an opportunity because I think that's what pe most people are really hungering for on social media. You know, if you're following an actor or a singer or whatever, you want to feel like you know them. You want
Right,
to feel invested in the product that they are turning out. And then it has more meaning to you. It's not just, oh yeah, I heard this song. It's I heard this song and she's really cool.
right,
I'm going to listen to more of her stuff now, and
right,
it's no different for us,
right.
hopefully. You know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I think it's funny. Like my son just looked up my name on Reddit and he found a post where somebody met me at the Hamptons, who done it. And like, he was just a very down to earth person. And I'm like, all right, this stranger's telling other strangers that that's
Yeah.
good for me. But it took me hopefully being down to earth in the first place and nice and, giving
Yeah.
your time to people. So, even before I was published or when I was first published, I was very big into like say yes to as much as you can because it's a blessing to be given opportunities to be in front of people, whatever it is,
Oh,
whether it's
100%.
volunteering at Thriller Fest or whatever. Do you go to BoucherCon at all?
I haven't been to BoucherCon. A couple of people have told me I need to. Just they tend to fall like within various conventions. For example, I'm speaking, and I have spoken at DragonCon in Atlanta
Oh,
for like the last 10 years, roughly, doing, law and government and policy stuff and all of that. And I think that BoucherCon is 4 or 5 days after the
oh,
Dragon Con. I just
yeah,
it's
it's
just
too
too
much.
much.
It's too
Yeah,
much. Yeah.
it's just too much. But I love doing that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've started doing more of that at Thriller Fest and other places. I was the weird kid. I remember this in middle school. The teacher asked, "Who wants to do their report written? Who wants to do it orally?" I was the only one who consistently chose doing the oral report.
Wow.
One, because
Masochist.
well, no, I love public speaking.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
get
great. That's so
I get
important.
energized by it,
Yeah, me too.
and to me it was just easier. Standing up doing an oral report was easier than having someone grade my grammar and my spelling and what
Yeah.
have you.
Totally.
So
Totally.
so
That's
maybe I'm
great.
saying I'm lazy. I don't know.
Yeah, so you're well positioned, I think. Well, Dwayne, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do the making it up portion of the show. So I usually have three books sitting right here, and I don't. So I'm going to ask you to give me a color, and I'm going to choose a color of that book from the bookshelves behind me. So what color are we going for?
Let's go with orange.
Orange. All right. We could do the Chicago Manual of Style. Let's see. So this is rare that I pull a nonfiction book, but I have Black Hawk Down, which has an orange spine.
Okay.
So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of good sentences in here. So we're going to pick a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that'll be the first sentence in a very short, maybe 2 minute long short story that will just alternate sentences back and forth. And for somebody who's written 9 books, this should be a breeze. So give me a page number between 1 and 340.
128.
Have you read this book, by the way?
No, I've seen the film, but I haven't read the book.
Book is unbelievable. Um, all right. It's a little brutal because it's nonfiction. All right, I'm not going to use that sentence. That was maybe too much. Um, I'm just going to read this, and you do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
They had expended thousands of rounds.
It's such a shame that with all that lead, they didn't hit any of their targets.
The desert heat was brutal. The sun so strong Waves of air made it hard to even scope their targets. The bullets were embedded in pits of sand and not the bodies of their enemies. They were running out of time.
And I hate to use the weather as an excuse for not taking out any of the enemies, but sometimes you have to recognize that circumstances are beyond your control and you don't always get what you want.
But sometimes, usually when you don't get what you want, it doesn't mean you're going to die. That wasn't the case here. There was no air support to call in. To Jeremy, he wondered if it would come down to using his knife.
What are you pulling the knife out for, Jeremy? Hoskins said. The enemy is 1,000 yards away. Stop wiping the sweat off your brow, focus, and take some of these jokers out.
I think we call it right there. I love the idea that the guy thinks he's like in the Revolutionary War. We've never done a war one before. That's a first. Um,
Awesome.
the other sentence I looked at was like, he looked down and he saw the lower part of Kowalski's arm, and I'm like, that would have been a great line, but because it's true, I'm like, ugh,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a little bit brutal. Well, man, it was great. I feel like, it's the longest I've ever talked to you, but it's nice to be able to kind of have this time together and to catch up and to kind of hear more about your story.
Yeah, this has been great. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Awesome. And thanks for all the great advice. I'm sure a lot of the writers who are listening to this are out there registering trademarks for their drafts right now. And yeah, now it's just great catching up and hopefully, well, you have the daughter who lives in Colorado, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
let me know if you're out here.
I will do.
I'm around.
All
All
right.
right, brother. Good talking.
Same here. Take care.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Dwayne Goetzel. I told you there's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of good advice. If you're an aspiring writer out there, I think Dwayne has an immense amount of wisdom that hopefully you're able to glean some of those tidbits from. Feel free to check out his Instagram. He's at Dwayne Goetzel. It's Dwayne, and Goetzel is Goetzel. You can check that out. And you can pop on over to carterwilson.com if you want to see all my books, my newsletter, my blogs, other episodes of Making It Up, and head on over to unboundwriter.com if you're interested in any of my writing coaching services. There's a whole separate website where I do all those fun things as well. And trying to scrap together a living here, folks. So you got to do what it takes. You got to have more. It's usually a lot more than just writing books. So I'm trying to figure things out. So if you're interested in hiring me as a coach, I'd love to work with you. That is it for now. This episode of Making It Up is over. Another one will be out just next week. I do truly appreciate all of you for watching and or listening to this. It warms my heart to know hopefully some people are getting some great advice out of these shows. So we'll see you next week. Take care.